In this video, I'm going to show you how I made this cake to celebrate my birthday. Now, if you know me, I usually don't make my own birthday cakes because the last thing that I want to do is spend more time in the kitchen. So I usually opt to get an ice cream cake. However, this week I actually over baked a cake and had to rebake it. So I saved the cake that was ruined. And I decided that I wanted to make myself a little cake slice with some ice cream on it because I love making food themed cakes and people hardly ever order them. And side note, I didn't wear any gloves because I'm making this cake for me. So just remember that before you make any comments about that. So let's get started. All right, I'm starting with two 8-inch cakes. I like to trim off the overhang and then just level the tops of the cakes off. And then I am spraying a little bit of simple syrup on here. They are a little over baked, so I'm just trying to add back a little bit of moisture. I do have a video showing you how I make simple syrup. That will be linked below. And I'm carefully just marking where I'm going to make my cuts before I actually make the cuts. I want to make sure that it is even on both sides. So first I like to make the impression, and that looks pretty even. And now I'm going to cut it all the way down. So I'm cutting it to a point, but I wanted it to be even on that top right and left side. Now I'm getting a little bit of icing down and I'm pressing that first layer down, and then I'm filling it with some vanilla buttercream because that's what I had, so that's what I'm using. And then place the other layer on top, and I'm really pressing it down. I want this to settle pretty quickly. So I'm just spreading icing along the seams, and then I'm going to take some of that plastic that it was originally wrapped in and just wrap that up and let it settle, and then I'm putting that in the freezer because I'm going to use that for the ice cream cake pop. Now I did put a little turntable and a plate on top to speed up the settling process, removing the plastic, and I'm getting a crumb coat on here. The point of the cake is very delicate, so I want to make sure that I don't mess that up, but I'm just getting a very thin coat all around this cake and letting the icing go over the very top. Then I'm taking a bench scraper, running that under hot water, and then drying it with a paper towel, and then just removing some of this icing, just trying to smooth it out. This is a crumb coat. It does not have to be perfect, and I do have a video showing you how I ice cakes, and I will link that in the description because this is just really quick. And then I'm doing a final coat of icing on here. So again, it was about a 1/2 inch thick, and I let the icing go over the top of the cake, ran my bench scraper under hot water, and I'm trying to smooth this icing out. And again, I go over this and how I ice smooth buttercream cakes. That video will be linked below. Now this is a crusting buttercream. This is American buttercream, so I'm doing the Viva paper towel method to smooth this out, using my hands and my fondant smoother against this to get it nice and even and smooth. And then I'm taking my spatula and just getting rid of the excess icing that's sticking over the top. And one more time, using my Viva paper towel to smooth it out, and I'm refining that top edge, getting eye level with the cake, just making that look nice and sharp. And then I'm going to use a little bit of hot water on the very top and spread that out just to smooth out the top of the cake, making sure I go from the edges to the inside so it doesn't drip down the cake. And let me put that back in the refrigerator. Now I'm making my cake look like a chocolate slice, so I rolled out that brown fondant really long, and I have a little bit of piping gel mixed with some water. I'm just getting that on the front section where it comes to a point, and then removing the excess off of the cake drum, and then cutting a straight edge along the bottom. It needs to be 4.5 inches tall, so I'm marking a line that's 4.5 inches tall and just cutting that. I'm going to cut down the sides as well, and then I want to wrap this around the cake, so I'm starting on one side and carefully wrapping this around. You want to make sure no air bubbles form behind it, and just pressing this down. I'm going to use my fondant smoother to smooth everything out, and I'm going to take my fingers and just pinch the point just to make it look a little sharper. And then I'm tracing this. I just put a piece of paper on top with an edible marker, and I'm tracing the top of the cake so I know how big to make the icing that's going on top. That'll make sense. Now I need to roll out some white fondant. I need to measure how long and tall it should be, so I rolled that out, and again it had to be 4.5 inches tall, so I'm just cutting that to size, and then it had to be about 8.5 inches long. So I'm just making sure that I cut this to the correct size before I wrap it around the cake. Now I'm getting a little more piping gel mixed with water on this back side and carefully putting this on here so no air bubbles form behind it. I did get a little air bubble. That's why I'm going to peel this off a little bit and try to get that out, and then press it back on and smooth it out. So I'm going to use my fondant smoother to really press it against the cake, and then I want to trim this. So I have a ruler, and I'm cutting through that white and that brown fondant. I'm going to remove the white piece and then remove the brown piece that's behind it, and then press that seam together. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, holding the ruler so I get a straight cut, removing the fondant behind it and pressing the seam together. and that looks good. I'm going to put that back in the refrigerator. Now I'm making the little cake ball, so I have that cake. I got that out of the freezer and let it thaw a little bit, and I just broke up a bunch of it, and I'm mixing it with some icing to make a huge ice cream cake ball. So I have my hands are wet so it doesn't stick, and I'm just forming this into a ball. I have a piece of wax paper on that cutting board. I'm going to set that down on here, make sure it looks like an ice cream scoop, and put that in the freezer. Now I'm putting that little pie shape on top of this, and I want to cut this a little bigger because I want it to go over the sides of the cake and make it look like it's dripping down the sides a little bit. This will make sense as I show you as I put it on the cake, but you see in the very back I'm going up and down. That way it's going to look like drips of icing coming down the back of the cake. Again, this will make sense as I put it on top. So I'm removing that excess fondant and laying it over the top of the cake. Now you can see why I was cutting it a little bit bigger than that pie shape. And then I'm getting a little bit of water underneath, so I'm painting it on the purple part of the fondant, and then I'm going to stick this down. I just find it easier to get the fondant in place first and then glue it down after you have everything in the right position. So I'm just carefully making sure I don't get any air bubbles or wrinkles as I'm pushing that down. That looks good. I'm going to put that back in the refrigerator. Now I'm rolling out the fondant for the icing strip in the middle. So I rolled it out really long, and I'm just using my wheel cutter to cut little waves. I have a ruler there so it doesn't get too distorted. I'm getting a little bit of water on the very back, and then I'm starting in that back white section, and I'm eye level with the cake, and I'm making sure that I am putting this directly in the center and just wrapping this around to the other side, and then where it meets in the back, I'm just going to cut off the excess and then press the seam together. Now I'm rolling this out for the icing detail on the very top. I put it on top of the cake to make sure it was long enough, and then I'm just pinching it just to give it a little bit of texture and laying it down on top. It's a little too long, so I'm going to take my scissors and just cut it to the correct length. And you can see how I have it hanging over the sides just a little bit. And then once I have it in the right position, then I'm going to, again, get a little bit of water underneath it and stick it down. And that looks good. I'm going to put that back in the fridge. And now I'm making the jimmies. So I'm rolling out a bunch of different colored fondant using my ribbon cutter so they are all the exact same height. And using my X-Acto knife to cut these, I'm just eyeballing it to make sure that these are all the equal thickness. And then I'm making the cherry. I just rolled that red fondant into a ball, and I'm pushing it down on the top just to give it a little indent. I'm going to set those aside. Now I melted some white candy melts and got that out of the freezer. And I'm just taking a spoon and doing this in little sections. So I'm using the spoon to press this down the side of that little cake ball until it gets to the very bottom of that wax paper. And I just want to cover this entire thing with these melted candy melts. Now I'm using the spoon to get the chocolate into the correct position. And I want to bring the chocolate all the way down to where that wax paper is, so the entire thing is covered and you can't see any of that cake underneath it. And then I'm just using my spoon to smooth this out and make sure that it is all the way down to the very bottom. And luckily, ice cream scoops aren't perfect. They look a little chunky like this, so it does not have to be perfect, which is nice. I'm smoothing out the top a little bit because I'm going to put some chocolate on there. So I'm going to just put that back in the refrigerator. And now I have some wire here. I have my snips. I'm cutting the wire, and I'm just wrapping the wire a little wonky around here. This is going to go on top of the cherry, but I wanted to get that little swirl in the wire. I'm going to set that aside. And also I rolled this little ball. I'm going to put this at the top of the wire. You'll see what I mean when I do it. Now I got my cake out of the refrigerator, and I'm removing this from the wax paper, get 2 toothpicks underneath it, and I'm going to stick that down into the center of the cake. And now I melted some chocolate candy melts as well, and I'm using a spoon just to get a little bit of this chocolate on top. And again, I'm using the spoon to get the drips into place. So I'm putting it on the very top and then just bringing it down the sides just ever so slightly. That way it can look like it's melted fudge on the very top of that ice cream scoop. And then I'm putting the cherry on top and then getting that piece of wire and sticking that into the cherry. It was still a little too long, so I took my snips and just trimmed it, and then I'm sticking that other little piece of fondant on top. How adorable is that? Now I want to clean the cake drum, so I have a wet paper towel, and I'm just removing any cornstarch or icing that might be on that drum. And I'm getting a little bit of water behind all of these jimmies and putting them down, or you can call them sprinkles. I'm from Philly, so I call them jimmies. And just making sure that they are not all in the same direction and none of the colors are touching. Like none of the same colors are next to each other. Get a little bit of non-toxic glue around the edge of the cake drum and I'm behind the ribbon and press that down. And then I'm getting some curlies on here. I have a video showing you how I make these and I will link that below, but just getting a little bit of piping gel underneath each one and sticking them down. I just feel like curlies make everything look a little festive. And here is the cake. How cool is that? Happy birthday to me and all my fellow Cancers. So here you go. Here is my big cake slice birthday cake. How adorable is this? And if you know me, you know I love ice cream. I would eat ice cream every single day for the rest of my life if I could. So that's why I put this little ice cream scoop on top. Let me set this aside. Now, you can go into a little bit more detail with this cake by taking a crumpled up piece of aluminum foil and pressing it against the brown fondant or whatever color fondant you use for the cake to add a little bit of texture once you wrap the cake with it. However, I wanted to keep this a little simple. I was just trying to get this done as quickly as possible. But the possibilities are endless. You could do different color cake and icing and customize it however you would like. So I cut two 8-inch cakes into the correct shape, and that usually feeds about 20 to 25 people if it's whole. And by cutting out those pieces, I would say that this slice feeds about 15 to 20 people. And if I were to charge for this cake, it would be about $225 to $250. So I think that's it. What new techniques did you learn in this video? I would love to know. Leave it in the comments below. And just a reminder, I have ebooks with all of the recipes that I use. There's my signature scratch pound cake recipes, my best doctored cake mix recipes, my buttercream icing and filling recipes, along with my favorite numbers and my favorite fonts. So they will all be linked in the description. And I do have a Cake Academy membership program where I can help you elevate your cakes to the next level. All of that information is in the description as well. Please like this video if you liked it, and if you're enjoying my tutorials, I would be so grateful if you could buy me a coffee. My link is down below. And I would love it if you would keep in touch on socials, and you can check out my website. And if you want to stick around, you can watch this video next and hit subscribe and the bell if you haven't already. Thank you so much for watching. I love you guys, and remember, it's cake, have fun. I will see you on the next one. Bye.